Chioma did not knock. She walked straight into the executive floor of Kong Group on a Monday morning, set her bag on the desk closest to the window, and opened her laptop before the HR assistant even finished calling her name from the doorway. The assistant stepped forward, voice low like she was afraid the walls would hear. "Miss Chioma, the briefing room is actually on the third floor. All the previous supervisors worked from." "I'm not a previous supervisor," Chioma said, without looking up. "Where is he?" The assistant blinked. "Mr. Kong has a standing morning meeting until. Tell him I'm here." There was a long pause. Then the sound of heels retreating quickly down the hall. Chioma pulled out a thick folder and laid it flat on the desk. 7 names. 7 departure dates. 7 resignation letters, each one vague enough to mean nothing and specific enough to confirm everything. She had read them all twice on the flight over. She had read them a third time in the hotel last night. And what struck her, what had been striking her since the moment Meridian Advisory handed her this file, was not that 7 people had quit. It was that not one of them had filed a formal complaint. Not a single one. People who quit because a job is hard file complaints. People who quit because they're afraid do not. She underlined the word afraid in her notebook and kept reading. 23 minutes later, the door opened. Kong Tae-woo walked in the way men walk when every room they have ever entered has rearranged itself around them. He was tall, composed, and coldly handsome in the way that suggested he had never once needed to try. He looked at Chioma sitting at the desk closest to the window, his window in his floor, and said nothing for a full 3 seconds. "You're my space," he said finally. Chioma looked up. "I'm in my workspace. There's a difference." He tilted his head slightly. "The supervisors work from the 3rd floor. Then it's a good thing I'm not a supervisor." She folded her hands. "I'm a behavioral consultant. My methodology requires proximity to the subject. That's you. So this is where I work." Tae-woo studied her the way a man studies something he has already decided to discard but hasn't gotten around to yet. "You'll quit before Friday." Chioma smiled politely, the way you smile at someone who has just said something mildly incorrect. "I've already blocked the next 6 weeks in my calendar. But I appreciate the projection." He left without another word. Chioma turned back to her laptop and exhaled slowly through her nose. Her hands were completely steady. That was the thing about Chioma. She had trained herself, very deliberately over many years, never to let her hands shake first. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you subscribe right now, hit the like button, and drop a comment below, because this woman is just getting started, and things are about to get complicated very fast. By day 2, Chioma had reorganized her entire approach. She stopped looking at the 7 supervisors as 7 separate failures and started treating them as one continuous story. She pulled every document she could access: exit timelines, project assignments at departure, board meeting schedules, financial filings. She laid them all out on her desk side by side, and she stared at them for a long time. Every single departure happened within days of someone getting access to an internal subsidiary called Kong Sable. She wrote the name on a fresh page, circled it. Then she opened a search window and started digging. Kong Sable had very little public-facing information. A registered subsidiary of Kong Group. Import and export logistics. Established 11 years ago. Nothing alarming on the surface. But the filing dates were inconsistent in a way that would only matter to someone who knew what they were looking for. Chioma knew exactly what she was looking for. On day 3, Tae-woo canceled their first scheduled check-in without notice. Chioma sent him a message. "Rescheduled for the same time tomorrow. My contract specifies weekly access. Please review Clause 4B. He did not respond. On day 4, she arrived at an executive strategy meeting she was contracted to attend and found her name removed from the attendee list at the door. The assistant at the entrance looked genuinely pained about it. Chioma thanked him, walked past him, opened the boardroom door, sat down at the table, and opened her notebook. Every head in the room turned. Tae-woo, seated at the head of the table, looked at her with an expression so controlled it could have been carved. "This meeting is for senior executives." Chioma slid a printed copy of her contract across the table without standing up. Clause 7. Consulting staff have full attendance rights to all strategic meetings during the engagement period. She looked at him calmly. I'll be quiet.
Pretend I'm furniture.
Someone at the far end of the table coughed to cover what sounded like a laugh. Taewoo looked at the contract. He looked at her. He said nothing, and he did not remove her. That night, Chioma sat alone in the office long after everyone had gone home. 3 empty coffee cups. A dozen tabs open. Her notebook covered in neat, tight handwriting. She was building a map, not of Kong Group's corporate structure, but of the decisions that had been made around it. The ones that looked accidental. The ones that were not. She heard footsteps in the corridor and didn't look up. You're still here, Taewoo said from the doorway.
So are you, she said.
He walked in slowly and looked at the papers spread across her desk. She didn't cover them. She didn't flinch. He sat down across from her, not warmly, but without the hostility that usually came with him like a second suit. What do you actually think of me? He said. Not a question exactly. More like something he had been carrying and wanted to put down briefly. Chioma looked up at him fully for the first time without the frame of a formal interaction around them. I think you're the most methodical person I've ever worked with, she said. He waited for the rest. The insult. The qualification. It didn't come. She meant it exactly as she said it. He stood up, walked to the door,
paused.
Then he turned around, went to the small counter near the window, came back with 2 fresh coffees, and set one beside her laptop without a word. Then he left. Chioma looked at the cup for a long moment. Then she picked up her pen and kept working. But something had shifted in the room, quiet and irreversible, the way temperature changes before rain. The next morning, Chioma filed a routine access request for Kong Sable's internal audit trail. Standard procedure. Within her contractual rights. She sent it to the finance department and copied Taewoo's office as protocol required. By afternoon, the request had been formally denied. The denial came from a man named Director O, Senior Finance Director, precise in the way people are precise when they are protecting something. He cited a proprietary data restriction clause that Chioma had never seen applied to a consultancy engagement before. She read the clause 3 times. Then she read his email 3 times. Then she walked upstairs. Taewoo was on a call when she entered. He held up one finger, without looking at her. She sat down and waited. When he hung up, she placed Director O's denial letter on the desk between them. I requested a standard audit review of Kong Sable, she said. It was blocked within 4 hours. Taewoo's face didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. Kong Sable falls outside your engagement scope. My engagement scope is the executive environment of this company. Kong Sable is a registered subsidiary. The obstruction is itself a behavioral data point. She kept her voice level. I'll be logging this in my weekly report to Meridian. I wanted to give you the courtesy of knowing that before I did. She reached across the desk for the report. His hand came down on it before she could close it. They were very close for a moment. She didn't move. Neither did he. Drop it, he said quietly. I will note that you said that too, she said, just as quietly. He let go of the report. He sat back. And then he said something she had not expected. You're smarter than the others. Chioma picked up the report and held his gaze. I know, she said, and walked out. But she couldn't log what she didn't yet fully understand. And Kong Sable was a wall she could not climb from inside the building. So she went around it. It took her 2 days to find Marcus, not his real name, the name he'd used when he'd worked as a junior accountant at Kong Group 3 years ago and left quietly with a generous severance package and, apparently, a conscience that had been bothering him ever since. They met off the record at a coffee shop 40 minutes outside Seoul. Chioma sat across from him and said nothing for the first minute. She had learned that silence made people fill spaces they intended to leave empty. Marcus wrapped both hands around his cup. Kong Sable isn't a logistics company, he said finally. I know, Chioma said. It's a layering mechanism. The funds come through 3 separate import fronts, cycle through Kong Sable's account structure, and come out clean on the other side. He paused. It's been running for over a decade. The chairman built it. Chioma kept her face still. And Taewoo. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. That's the part nobody outside that building knows. Tae-woo has been trying to dismantle it.
From the inside.
Quietly. Because if he moves too fast, his father's partners, the other families connected to that money, will interpret it as a power play and respond accordingly. He set down his cup. Those 7 supervisors. 2 of them were plants, sent by a rival faction to get close enough to the account structure to copy it and use it as leverage. Tae-woo found out. He removed them before they could. He exhaled. He didn't drive them all away because he's arrogant. He drove them away because he was protecting them from what happens to people who know too much in that building. Chioma was quiet for a long time on the drive back. She had been inside that building for 2 weeks. She had pushed past every wall he put up. She had found exactly what those other supervisors found. And unlike them, she was still there, which meant either Tae-woo had made a mistake, or he hadn't tried to remove her the way he removed the others. And she didn't know which possibility unsettled her more. Her phone rang at 9 that evening. A number she recognized, Vincent Cole, her senior contact at Meridian Advisory, the man who had placed her on this assignment. "How are things progressing?" he asked.
Smooth.
Unhurried. The voice of someone asking a question they already know the answer to. "On track," Chioma said carefully.
Good. A pause.
"You found the Kong Sable structure." She stopped walking. "How do you know what I found?" "Chioma." His tone shifted. Still smooth, but with something harder underneath it now. This was never a behavioral consulting engagement.
You know that.
"We need the account structure, the internal filing architecture. Compile it and send it directly to me. Not to Kong Group. To me." The air in the room felt different. She kept her voice absolutely flat. "What exactly is Meridian's interest in Kong Sable?" "That's not your concern. You have 48 hours. A breath. And before you consider refusing, I've been holding a very detailed ethics complaint against your license for the past 4 months. Fabricated, yes, but extraordinarily convincing. Send me what I need or I file it. Your career ends. Your reputation ends. Everything you've built." He let that sit. 48 hours. The line went dead. Chioma sat down on the edge of the desk. She stared at the wall. The thing she had built her entire professional life on, the unshakable certainty that she was the one who came into broken rooms and fixed them, was now sitting in pieces around her feet. She had been the broken thing.
Carried in. Aimed.
She sat there for a long time. Then she picked up her pen. And she started writing. Not the report Vincent wanted. Something else entirely. If you're still watching, and I know you are, this is the moment the whole story turns. Drop a comment right now. Tell me, would you have walked away or stayed? Because what Chioma does next is exactly why you should never underestimate a brilliant woman. She went to him at 8 o'clock the next morning. Tae-woo was already at his desk when Chioma walked in, closed the door behind her, and placed everything she had on the surface in front of him. The Kong Sable documentation, her handwritten notes, a printed summary of Vincent's call, time-stamped, the connection she had traced between Meridian Advisory and the rival faction that had been sending plants into Kong Group for the past 18 months. She stood with her hands at her sides and let him read. He didn't speak. He turned pages slowly, and she watched his jaw tighten once, then twice, then settle into something entirely still. When he finally looked up, she had never seen his face like that, stripped of the arrogance, stripped of the performance, just a man looking at the exact shape of the threat that had walked through his front door wearing a consultant's credentials. "You compiled all of this," he said. "Yes." "And then you brought it to me, instead of running." "Yes." He studied her. "Why?" Chioma didn't blink. "Because I was sent here to be used against you, and I refused. Because I don't work for people who fabricate evidence and call it leverage. And because you have been trying to protect this company from the inside with nobody standing beside you, and you deserve to know exactly what came through that door."
She paused.
"I didn't know, Tae-woo. When I accepted this assignment, I did not know." The room was completely silent. "I know," he said quietly. And something in the way he said it, no edge to it, no calculation, told her he had already known she didn't know. Had probably known for days. The silence stretched between them, and it was full of something that neither of them was going to name out loud. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. "Can you prove the Meridian connection to the rival faction?" he asked. "I already have." He nodded once. Then he picked up his phone. What happened in the next 24 hours was the kind of precision Chioma had observed in Tae-woo from the beginning, but had never seen fully unleashed. He made 4 calls. She witnessed 2 of them and understood only parts of what was said, but she understood enough. Within the hour, 3 of his most trusted people were moving. By midnight, Vincent Cole had been intercepted. By the following morning, Meridian Advisory's fabricated ethics file had been pulled apart, traced back to its source, and rendered completely useless. Director O was escorted out of the building at 11 that morning. He walked past Chioma in the lobby without looking at her. She watched him go and felt nothing except the particular satisfaction of a pattern finally closed. The hardest conversation happened that afternoon. Tae-woo met with his father. Chioma was not in the room. She sat outside in the corridor with her notebook open on her lap and did not write a single word for 45 minutes. She could hear nothing through the door. When it finally opened, Tae-woo walked out, paused when he saw her, and sat down in the chair beside her without being asked. He didn't say anything for a long moment. "He knew I had been dismantling it," Tae-woo said finally. "He thought I was doing it for leverage against him. And now he has seen the documentation of what the rival faction was building, what they would have done with it." He exhaled. "He's not a man who apologizes. But he gave me authority over Kong Sable's dissolution. That's the closest he knows how to get." Chioma nodded slowly. "That's enough," she said. He turned to look at her. "Is it?" She met his eyes. "Sometimes people can only give you the version of what you need that they're capable of giving. You decide if it's enough to keep going or enough to walk away. Either answer is valid." He was quiet for a moment. "Which one did you choose?" She knew he wasn't asking about his father anymore. "I haven't finished my report yet," she said. "Ask me when I have." The next 2 weeks were different. Not easier. The structural dismantling of Kong Sable was complicated and slow, and there were days the legal architecture of it made Chioma's temples ache. But Tae-woo stopped canceling meetings. He stopped removing her from rooms. He stopped building walls and started opening doors, and Chioma walked through each one with the same quiet confidence she had carried into this building on day 1, except that now she understood what she was walking through and why it mattered. On her last official day, she packed her temporary office with the same efficiency with which she had set it up 6 weeks ago. When she zipped the last bag, she turned around and Tae-woo was in the doorway. "You're submitting the final report today," he said. "Already sent. This morning." He nodded. "Then, I have a position. Internal advisory. Long-term engagement. No proxies, no intermediaries, full access." He paused. "No fabricati de six implants." She raised an eyebrow. That last one should have been the baseline. "It should have been," he agreed. She picked up her bag and walked toward the door. He didn't move out of the doorway. She stopped in front of him and looked up. "Send me the contract," she said. Something moved across his face, not quite a smile, but adjacent to it, the way a window is adjacent to light. He stepped aside. She walked past him, and just before she turned the corner, she allowed herself the smallest smile, private and entirely her own. 7 people had walked out of that office defeated. Chioma walked out having unraveled a criminal conspiracy, protected a man who didn't know how to ask for protection, and rebuilt a room that had been designed to break everyone who entered it. Not because she was sent to, because she refused to be anything less than exactly what she was. And that right there is what it looks like when you send a brilliant, fearless woman to do what intimidation never could. If this story moved you, do not leave without subscribing to this channel, because we tell stories about women who cannot be underestimated every single week. Hit the like button, drop a comment below, and tell us which moment was your favorite, and share this with someone who needs to see a woman win today. We will see you in the next one.